Hi, good morning. My name is Arunama Singh and I work with Social Business in the Balkans. And our topic for today's lecture would be customer discovery. We will be covering the basic concepts and the lessons that we have learned by doing previous customer discoveries. I would highly encourage you to go through our previous lectures, which are related to business model and business model canvas, which would help you understand the need of customer discovery. In our today's lecture, we will be covering the topics of customer discovery and breaking them down little by little. We would of course talk about the need of customer discovery, what is it, the basic customer discovery 101. And then maybe focus on the goals of why would you want to do a customer discovery with your business. Once we've decided the goals and our assumptions, we would talk about different steps in a customer discovery survey. So the first step targets on problem theory, the second is customer theory, and then it is your hypothesis and assumptions about your customer and your problem theory. We would also be working slightly with how do you do your surveys and good ways of collecting your data. We would be going through the data types and what are the best methods to use. And finally, we would be talking about how do you convert that data into ideas or that data into processable structures. And then, of course, the final thing would be what are the next steps in a customer discovery. So, first, what is a customer discovery? Customer discovery is a business or an entrepreneur trying to figure out who the customer is. Whenever we start a business, our basic purpose behind starting a business is not because we feel a need or we have a problem. And this is something that we iterate again and again in our lectures, that you are never your own customer, because if you are your own customer, well, then there's only one customer. You start a business, you produce a result, you develop a solution to a problem that a group of people are having who would then be your customers. So a problem theory can be defined as the problem that a group of individuals are facing, and the solution that you would be providing it to would be the solution theory. So a problem theory can be the one problem that you are trying to solve for your users. It is a way of defining that if the problem really exists, and if a problem exists, what is the data that you have to prove that it really does? There is an assumption, there is a way of understanding that you believe that your customers need something. For example, you believe that customers want to eat pizza for lunch. Now, you getting calls from customers saying that we need pizza and your restaurant doesn't have pizza is a way of understanding. That's your data. So that would be a real problem. But your assumption that your customers want to eat data, that isn't the right way of understanding a problem. So a problem theory is a way of designing your solution or a way of designing your product when you know a problem really exists. So to define a problem theory and to articulate it, we use a method called as the challenge statement. The challenge statement, if you see on the slide, is a one-line statement that defines what your product is and why is it there. So it would have 4 empty lines in which you would fill up your solution. I would highly encourage you to do it as we speak. So we will make dash for dash in dash because they need dash. Your who are your customers. Your who is your customer in a specific scenario. Your where is the geolocation of your customer or is the state of mind or state of being that your customer is in. Your what is your product. Your what is the answer you're providing, and your why is the reason why they need it. So having these 4 answers helps you understand not just your customer but your product better. So for example, we will make pizza for students in technical universities because they need fast, good food. Now, your challenge statement helps you articulate exactly who are you providing for, what are you providing for, and why are you providing for. And once you have your challenge statement, we'll take a few seconds just for you to finish it. Good, okay. So once you have your challenge statements, We all know it's a lie. It's an assumption. Your challenge statement is an assumption until and unless you have data to prove it otherwise. When you have data, when you know that there are these university students who are calling up your restaurant again and again, then you know that's data. But right now, it's an assumption. How we clarify this assumption is to test. Now, a testing technique, and we're going to talk about this later in the presentation as well. Your testing technique would be talking to the people who would be your future customers. A basic method that we recommend is going on surveys, and we would be talking about good ways of taking surveys as well, and understanding the people that you're producing for. There's a saying that goes that if you don't talk to your customers, how will you know how to talk to your customers? Because that's when that comes into marketing. So our basic purpose behind testing a challenge statement would be to discover the why. Why do your customers need your product? Because if you understand the why, you would know that once that why changes, your product will change as well. The second would be to prove the who. You think your customers are the students, but can they be someone else? It would help you expand your market. It would help you understand your market better. And finally, to determine the what. The what is your product. The what is always the final product. And the what would always be the last step of your testing. Because in basic testing, if you go and ask somebody, will you buy my bread? Or will you buy, since we were using the pizza example, if you are a restaurant owner, if you go to somebody and say, will you buy my pizza? Just 50% of the time, just to keep up with the discussion or to not hurt your feelings, people will answer yes. That does not mean that they will really buy your pizza unless they pay you money for it. So to start your questioning with the what is never a good idea. The sequence that we recommend is to start with why, to prove who are the who have that why, and finally what would be the product. Also, we start our businesses with a solution in our mind. We start with our businesses thinking that this is what we want to make. But what we recommend is to forget your solution. Focus on understanding the people and the problems. Focus on understanding who are you creating and why do they need what you're creating. This would help you modify your product and modify your market as and when it's required. In businesses, it is much better to have a customer-focused approach than a product-focused approach, because your customers are the ones who are selling, who are paying for your product. Your product does not sell on its own. So we would then next focus on customer discovery, making sure that you understand that the problem really exists, that you never create products on assumptions. You should prioritize your problems and then decide how do they impact your business. Your problems would then move into your core business values, and then you would have to test, proof, and validate it. The testing and the proofing and validation would be coming in the next steps, but the first thing is to understand who your customer really is and what are the problems that they're facing. So which then gives us to customer theory. Customer theory works around what we've already decided in our problem theory, but it's one part of a problem theory, the who. A customer theory is a way of understanding that who is facing the problem, and in discovering what the problems those people are, you discover the why. And once you know the who and the why, you can develop and test ideas for the what. So this is where we start. Now, if you look at your slide, we are talking about developing a customer persona. One second, sorry. Customer persona is a way of defining in real life what your customer looks like. If you, now in this day and age, if you Google customer right now on Google, what you would see is images of faceless men and women. They are not your customers. Your customers have personality, your customers have preferences, your customers have habits, which then move into your product. So when we start defining a customer, your customer is never a nameless, faceless person. Your customer is always an individual who has a story. And that is what we would like to focus on when you are developing a customer persona. So for example, right now, we think if we are a social media profile, fine. So let's assume our business is a social media. Facebook, let's assume our business is Facebook. So if we are Facebook, we are looking at Celine, who is our customer persona. And what Celine likes is she likes to travel. She is a well-known blogger in Paris. She has just published her first book, and she has a lot of followers on Twitter and Instagram. Her basic needs, what are her biggest needs that she needs to fulfill? Celine needs a way to dash and wants the experience to be dash because she values dash. Now this is a very basic way of understanding. She needs an easy solution to grow her personal brand. She wants to be famous. She fears that she'll never get public recognition, and she is motivated by her friends and family. Now understanding this about your customer is very, very important because you get to know what are their sources of information, you get to know what are their sources of understanding a product. Again, for example, if you were to go out to a restaurant to eat, who would you check with? You would ask your friends, you would look at TripAdvisor. So if I was a restaurant, I would try doing public relations. I would try to convince my customers to give me a good feedback. If I wanted my friends and family to understand what is important to me, I would be talking about it, and that is how you spread your message. Same thing, I would be pushy to tell my customers who are happy with my service to give me a recommendation on TripAdvisor, because that is how people get the information. So understanding your customer gives you an opportunity to know how to talk to them or how to sell to them, something that does come later at the stage of time when you have your product. But it is very, very important to understand what your customer values and what are the needs and fears. Every product that is developed, every business that is developed is after a basic need. You cannot be selling a product without the need of it. So I would highly encourage you to do a customer persona for your own business right now. Your business could be anything. Your business could be a grocery store, your business could be a travel agency, but what is important are the people who would be using its services, and for you to understand who are these people, what are their needs, what are their fears, what are their motivation. And once you have your assumption, it also helps to have a picture in mind, to have a small portrait of your customer, because it gives a more humane effect to it. And once you have that, you know what happens next. It is an assumption, because that's what you think your customer looks like, that's what you think your customer needs. And once you have that, we brand it as an assumption. Once we have that as an assumption, our next step is to test these assumptions. You again go out, talk to your customers and understand, are they what really you think they are? Do they have the fears that you think they have? And in between your customer and your product is something that is called as a user journey, and that's what we're going to be talking about next. A user journey is how a customer interacts with your product. Again, let's take the restaurant example. If I am a customer of a restaurant and for example, if I were to be looking for lunch or if I would be looking for dinner options, what would I do? How would I interact with your product? Would I step out of my house and go to the first restaurant that's available? Would I look around and look for pamphlets or brochures of restaurants in my house? Would I go to TripAdvisor, look for what these restaurants are? Or would I ask my friends and family? How I interact with your company, how I interact with your product, your brand, it's very, very important, because then you know what to modulate. So in the process of your customer journey, you also understand the touch points that your customer has with your brand. Your customer has certain touch points where it interacts with your brand, where it knows that these are the touch points that the brand should interact back with me. So, in case of your user journey mapping, how you would proceed is to review your persona. You have your customer persona from the previous slide, and once you review their core needs and expectations, you map them out in the way that your customer would interact. For example, the customer has a problem, it searches for a solution. The customer has a problem, that the customer is hungry, it searches for a solution. How are they searching for solution? And when they search for solution, how will they find you? If they are searching for solution online, they would discover you, and that is discovery. They discover you on TripAdvisor, they discover you on other apps, they discover you on somebody's Facebook profile. And after the discovery, how are they committed to your product? Do they call? Do they mail? Do they message? What is the first action do they take? Your first action helps you understand what are your messages that you should be talking about during your first action. And after the first action is done, after they've already ordered, that completes your customer cycle. Now to iterate, your customer will always, until unless it's like a one-time product, like a house, your customer will come back to you. So your customer journey technically never ends after they've bought from you. Your customer journey continues into the same thing again, that what happens when the next time they have a problem and they have to get to your product. Your customer journey should not stop at the thinking and the buying, because the thinking has to happen again. So we highly encourage you to consider customer journey as a circular excuse me. Okay. Customer journey is a cyclic process. Your customer journey never stops. If your customer has finished buying your product, it will need to buy your product again, unless it's a house or something exorbitant. But once you understand that, you must understand the customer's journey is an ongoing process that keeps happening till the time that your customer is no longer your customer, which should never be there. So with our customer journey mapping, we would understand what our customers are facing and how. Now, just to say the few above things, the three things that we've talked about: the problem solution, the problem theory, the customer theory, and the customer journey. All three of them right now are assumptions because we've not tested them. And now is the time we talk about testing our hypothesis. Now, hypotheses and assumptions are things that we consider are not validated unless they have data. Data comes in various forms and numbers, and we're going to talk about that later. But your assumptions are a way of you understanding your customers and then testing them out. There are multiple ways of testing your assumptions, but we recommend the most simplest way, which is convenient for you. You can use a Word document, you can use a Google Drive, you can use another assumption tester called a Trello. And what they do is they let you prioritize your assumptions. We would encourage you to take each topic: problem theory, customer theory, and customer journey, and do an assumption brain dump, which is just listing down your top assumptions that you have about your customer, product, and the journey. And once you've done that, you should prioritize these assumptions. That what are the top 3 or what are the top 5 assumptions if you did not validate, it would kill your business. How that would work is for you to understand what happens if each of these assumptions are proven otherwise. If you think your assumptions are students and they're not, they're retirees of the age of 60, maybe you're communicating to them in the wrong way. Maybe the retirees don't like pizza, maybe they don't like something lighter. So if that assumption is not tested, it would kill your business. So for you to understand better what you are testing, I would highly recommend you to prioritize your assumptions in top 5 or top 10 methods. And once that is done, we go to the next step, which is testing your assumption. So the testing theory is a way of testing your assumptions regarding anything, not just the 3 topics we spoke about, in form of surveys. Surveys can be of multiple ways, but it's highly recommended not to do leading discussions. We have in past done interviews, we've done online form, and it all boils down to what are you asking and how are you asking. But first, let's talk about the data that you collect. There are 2 types of data when you're trying to do your testing. There will be the qualitative data and the quantitative data. The quantitative data will be a way of understanding what happens and how many times. And the qualitative data would be why does it happen. I go to supermarket 4 times in a week. Qualitative data would be why do I go 4 times a week? Because I don't get all my products in one time, because I don't remember, because I don't have an app to save what are the products that I need. So between your quantitative and qualitative data, they both are very important, but it's how you move that data into real products or real ideas. Quantitative data is usually identified by numbers. It's a quantity of thing, whereas the qualitative data is a descriptive. It's a narrative. It is usually associated with the feelings or the emotions that are occurring when you are trying to get that data. Quantitative data is directly associated with success. It's directly associated with metrics. You have 45 users on your new app. Why are the users there is your qualitative data. So the quantitative data can very often be the result of your process, while qualitative data is your process instead. Why did those things happen? The quantitative data on its own provides very limited learning about why are the things happening or why is a certain activities taking place, whereas qualitative data would give you a much more in-depth learning about your users, your product, and the process that you're following. Both of them equally important, cannot be secluded. We highly recommend you to go through both the process, maybe split your survey into 50-50 about quantitative data and qualitative data. To give you a few examples, in the next slide you can see a few examples about quantitative data and qualitative data. For example, the quantitative data examples would be the website bounce rate was 43%, average growth rate is 24%, average number of times users opens the app is 2. Whereas the qualitative data would be a control group of active users say that the core problem is saving up for purchase rather than the decision to spend. Or the core motivation for spending money is attached to feeling good and not about owning things. So as you understand maybe now slightly better what are the final results that you're going to get out of both of your data types. There are different methods of collecting these data, and you can feel free to test any of them. And it also depends, it's a very culturally sensitive topic about how do you want to take your interviews, and we would highly encourage you to test it in your own cultures, in your own countries, to see what helps. So for example, the quantitative data methods would be analytics platform. For example, the websites that tell you how many times have people gone to your website and how many users have been there, what gender have they been on. Event recording would be people who show up for event, what did they like, what did they not like. Pattern recognition, how many people came into an event, were they women, were they not women, how did they do certain things, 50% of the people had coffee after lunch, things like that. And finally, surveys. Surveys can be biased. Surveys, since they're not done in especially online surveys, they can tend to have not the best possible result, but they're a very, very good way of collecting mass quantitative data. For example, the same thing in qualitative data. They can be focused on user interviews, on usability testing and blind testing. Usability testing is a way of understanding how people use your products. So if I have an app, I would like to give it to users and ask them to test what's happening, for them to move on my app while I am noticing them, to see what are the things that they're doing on my app. The same thing if I am selling saucepans, kitchen equipment, I would give them to users to see how are they working with my saucepan, and do they also consider what are the important things that I think are important in my product, or am I communicating this right? So these two kind of data collection methods are used mostly in understanding your customers better. We do speak slightly more about what kind of data questions are important for you and how can you use them. So for example, the quantitative data questions, closed questions and open questions. Why should you be doing closed questions? Closed questions is when you just need a number and not so much as the theory behind it. A closed question would be, how many handbags do you own? 5. Why do you own so many handbags? Because I need different for different occasion. A simple yes or no answer. The problem with both of these things, both of these way of getting data, is the kind of information and what does the information give you. So a closed question gives you a definite result if that's what you're looking for. An open question gives you an ability to understand and to interrogate your customers better. Our focus for customer survey is usually qualitative data because it helps you understand your customer better, not so much as leading. So we recommend you to use any of them, but our recommendation is with qualitative data. So what do we test? In the beginning, we start testing the most important questions. We start with the ones that we believe are our killing assumptions, and then we go down in our question line. The problem is that a human attention span is maximum 15 minutes, and once you start moving down the question, you lose the interest of your user. So to ensure that does not happen, please prioritize your questions and put them in the beginning. Also, it is important to get a rapport with your users, with the people that you're doing your interviews with, and if they're not comfortable in sharing information with you, the information that you would get would not be the most correct one. So you start at the beginning, stay focused, and always follow up. Do not stop testing unless you validated the assumptions that you have. So how do you test it? You start with qualified to determine the quantified. So you look at the qualified assumption. So people go to supermarkets because they need food, and then you move into quantified. How many times do they go to the supermarket? It's always simpler to let a person, your user, speak and then ask for numbers rather than start for numbers, because moving from quality to quantity is simpler than quantity to quality. Ask open questions. Do not give them an opportunity to answer in 1 word or 2 word, because it is much more difficult to understand the data. And finally, listen. The point of a discovery or the point of a user survey is not to convince that you should be my customer, but to know that can or cannot that person be your customer. So we can do a testing practice, and you will also receive exercises for the same. We would talk about example questions. What are the 5 kind of example questions that you would have to test if a user would buy your product? So, where do you own handbags would be a qualifier. The way that you decide a qualifier or not is to see if that person even comes under your customer group. If I do not eat outside ever, which is rare, but if I don't eat outside ever, then maybe I'm not the good customer for your pizza restaurant. If I don't carry handbags, maybe I'm not a good customer for your handbag. So a qualified question is a basic yes or no question, which then leads into a qualitative question. Do you own handbags? Where do you buy your handbags? Why? What kind of handbags do you buy? Why? The concern remains that you should never ever stop at one single question without getting more into the data, because a human reaction is to give you the most superficial answer that is possible, because users or people who are giving interviews do not understand what information are you looking for. Now, if they do understand the information that you're looking for, it would be a biased interview, and you would still get results, but it is always more interesting to have an unbiased interview in which people talk about their experiences, giving you an opportunity to learn more about their needs. So if you look at the slide, you will see a group of example questions. The reason why the next slide says non-leading is because if you lead your participants into an answer, you're not really testing anything. You're ensuring that they say what you want them to say, which dissolves some of your purpose. You're trying to understand what are the needs that you don't know yet already, if you already know all the needs. What's the point of doing the survey? So there's why there's a discussion between leading and non-leading questions. Do not suggest people that you have a problem. I know you have a problem because you do not get pizzas in your neighborhood. No, that's your way of putting your idea. Having non-leading questions is very, very important if you genuinely want to validate your idea and test your idea. So there are a few more examples about non-leading questions on the slide that you can see. Also, we speak about slightly extensively about why non-leading questions make customers uncomfortable, because customers tend to lie. They tend to lie because people want to please you. It is socially unacceptable to be rude and tell people that no, we will not buy your product. They would always say yes, I would buy your product. So factor this in, and then you should ask questions that would make it hard for them to lie. To ask them not directly a yes or no question, but to beat around the bush and ask them what are the reasons, why would they do it, what else would they do. So also, it's a rule of thumb that you should avoid speculative questions and watch out for words like could, would, should, as opposed to will and must. It also communicates what are your customers most passionate about. So the next thing that we would want to talk about are the 5 whys. Now, the 5 whys is our terminology that we would like to say, if you ask a question, always ask why 5 times after that. Well, it would help you get to the bottom of what your customer is talking about. Because we believe that having 5 whys automatically gets you to the bottom of the real theory. For example, I own 5 handbags. Why? Because I can't carry all my things wherever I go in the same handbag. Why? Because I do not want to just look poor with one handbag. Why? Because status is important to me. I care about what the society thinks. And that is when you come to the real motivation of your customer. Your customer wants to look good because she cares about what the society thinks. And understanding that is a better way of selling your product. You would then no longer sell your product saying that, oh, we are selling you this product because we think you want comfortable handbags. No, that's not what she wants, a handbag. So the entire skills of developing interview skills is important in basic day-to-day life as well. When you are talking to people, it's very important to understand their real motivation and needs. So we recommend that you be an archaeologist. It's a skill you need to practice, and it's not something that comes naturally to people. And not everyone is good at it, but more and more you practice, you get better. And have fun. The basic point of doing these interviews is to understand your customers and to know them better, and it should not be a tiring thing. The process is to have a very focused assumption about your value product. It's to have the one thing that you would like to test about your key value proposition. And once you stumble upon an opportunity that you know that this is something that would yield you into a good understanding or a learning, dig, why. Also put as much time as you can for your customer validation, for your customer persona, because your customers are as important as your product is, more important than as your product is. So you should spend just as much time discussing your customer, and that would help you validate your assumptions better. Also, you could do your customer interviews in groups, because that would help you take notes and understand them better, but maybe not to overwhelm your user interview. And finally, we would like to conclude by saying that your customer discovery should be a process. It should be an ongoing process. Your customers you never totally understand your customers. Your customers change, your product change, and as and when your product change, it's highly recommended to do your customer discovery again. The iteration always is helpful. Big companies like Facebook still iterate every year, because your customer change, your needs change, and if you do not evolve as fast as your customer is, it's very difficult for a business to keep up with the growing world. And the customer discovery on its own, there are multiple methods, there are multiple resources that can be found online, and you can find them in the web references as well that you can utilize. Other than that, thank you so much for your time, and hope you have a good time discovering your customer.